abdomen, and diarrhea. So, Abhinava, would you like to start?
Sir, in the first image, I can see a hypodense lesion in the head of the pancreas, heterogeneously enhancing it is, and
yeah, go ahead. What else can you see? So she's obviously talking about this lesion here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other comment on this image? Okay, so if you see the next image, this lesion is sitting on top of the celiac axis bifurcation. There's another very important finding here, that there is a hyper-enhancing lesion in the liver as well, right?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
don't call this just a hypodense lesion, because you have all the three images in front of you, right?
Yes,
and this is obviously the arterial phase, isn't it? You can see contrast, you can see dense opacification of the aorta and the celiac axis and the SMA. And for a pancreatic lesion, this is a hypervascular lesion. Large areas of this lesion are showing avid enhancement, which is actually greater than the normal pancreas. There are, of course, some smaller areas.
Turn audio off.
There are some areas which are hypodense as compared to the rest of the pancreas. They may be areas of necrosis. Okay?
Yes,
then
sir.
I would have also wanted you to comment on the stomach. Any comment on the stomach?
Sir, it is
although I agree it's not fully
diffusely thickened. It is homogeneously enhancing and diffusely thickened.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. So the stomach, so we have seen stomach is diffusely thick walled, and there is a hypervascular lesion in the pancreas. It may well be in the neck of the pancreas or the proximal body, because the head, comes a little lower down and is located medial to the second part of the duodenum. We have not reached the head as yet. Okay. And we've also seen a hypervascular lesion in the liver. In addition, if you see this scan, this is actually the head of the pancreas, and what is this structure here? Can you see my cursor?
Yes, sir.
So what is this structure? This is likely to be a lymph node. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. These are some coronal images. How do you want to describe this? This is also the arterial phase. Just quickly.
Similarly, in the first image, I can see the diffuse wall thickening of the stomach.
Very good.
The second image, hyper enhancing lesion in the body of the pancreas.
Right. Yes, and along with that?
Hyper enhancing lesion in the liver.
Hypervascular lesion in the liver. So what are you thinking of? So this is the kind of case that you're very likely to be shown in the exam. And what do you want to see next after this? Want to see any other image of this CT? You want to look at the venous phase, isn't it? You've seen the arterial phase. You want to look at the venous phase. And it's not really showing much washout. You can see here that it is still probably more hyper-enhancing than the remaining body and tail of the pancreas. This is the lesion located in the neck of the pancreas. The head would actually project somewhere here. And the lesion in the liver is actually not evident on the portal venous phase at all. And why is that?
It's washout. It is showing washout.
No. It has become isodense. This hasn't. Washout is when it becomes hypodense compared to the background liver, right?
Okay,
by definition, washout is when the lesion becomes hypodense as compared to the background normal liver parenchyma. But there is a phase in the contrast kinetics where the lesion is enhancing as much as the background liver. And that is why we say that hypervascular metastases can be picked up only on an arterial phase. If you do only a portal venous phase, you may actually miss hepatic metastases coming from hypervascular primary. Okay, so we have a thick-walled stomach, we have a lesion in the neck of the pancreas, and we have a thick-walled stomach. What are you suspecting, and what will you tell your clinician to do?
Sir,
neuroendocrine tumor of what kind? Which of the neuroendocrine tumors? To explain this thick-walled stomach?
Sir,
No, not carcinoid. Carcinoid can occur in the pancreas, but is very rare. We would think of a gastrinoma. When you have a hypervascular lesion which looks like a neuroendocrine tumor of the pancreas, and you have a thick-walled stomach, patient coming with pain, abdomen, and diarrhea, you've got to think of a gastrinoma. Okay. Now, what are the other differentials of hypervascular lesions in the pancreas? One is, of course, we have seen neuroendocrine tumor. What are the other hypervascular lesions in the pancreas?
So,
I'm trying to keep this as close to what your Viva at the MD exam or your DNB examination is likely to be. Tell me, any other lesions which can be hypervascular? We know carcinoma pancreas is hypovascular, right?
yes.
So that's a totally different appearance, and we'll not consider that in the differential. Tell me at least two entities which are hyper-enhancing in the pancreatic parenchyma, hyper-enhancing lesions in the pancreas. Shreya, do you want to try?
So hypervascular. Hello.
Yeah, go
Am
ahead.
I audible, sir?
Yeah.
So hypervascular mets from either renal cell carcinoma or thyroid mets or even carcinoid mets.
Yeah.
Um,
So thyroid is very unlikely to go to the pancreas, but yes, renal cell carcinoma is a primary which often metastasizes to the pancreas and produces hypervascular metastases. Okay. Anything else?
so maybe some mixed solid cystic lesion, like maybe a SPEN.
Okay, sometimes a SPEN may be more solid and may show enhancement and may look hypervascular. Similarly, sometimes a serous cyst adenoma, the tiny cyst may be so small that it may not be appreciable on CT, and it may actually, we know it may actually look like a solid lesion and then can show arterial enhancement. There is one very unusual, rare lesion which occurs exclusively in the tail of the pancreas, which is called intrapancreatic accessory spleen. Okay? So always remember that that's also a differential diagnosis for a hyper-enhancing lesion in the pancreas. So intrapancreatic accessory spleen behaves like the spleen. In the arterial phase, it will show you the typical, striped kind of appearance like the spleen shows, and will follow the same attenuation pattern as the spleen. If you do an MR, it will follow the same signal intensity as the spleen and similar diffusion restriction. Spleen shows diffusion restriction. So the intrapancreatic accessory spleen is nothing but a splenunculus, which is located in the pancreas, inside the pancreas. And it occurs exclusively in the tail of the pancreas. So when you see a lesion like that, you should include that in your differential diagnosis as well. Okay. So these are the lesions that we've talked of. Hypervascular lesions can be neuroendocrine tumors, metastases from hypervascular primaries, which, as Shreya pointed out rightly, could be from renal cell cancer, serous cyst adenomas, and intrapancreatic accessory spleen. Now, neuroendocrine tumors can occur in isolation, or they may occur in the setting of syndromes like the MEN1 syndrome, von Hippel-Lindau syndrome, and tuberous sclerosis. Then in the exam, you're very likely to be asked, what are the normal gastrin levels? And this is something that you should know. Normal levels of at least the commonly done hormones, we should know. Normal fasting gastrin levels are up to 180 picograms per ml. A gastrinoma is suspected when these levels are more than 1000 picograms and the gastric pH is less than 2.5. The diarrhea which these patients have is because of the excessive acid in the stomach. There is too much hydrochloric acid secreted in response to the gastrin, and that gives rise to diarrhea. In fact, when these patients undergo Ryle's tube aspiration and all the acid is sucked out, their diarrhea typically tends to improve. If the gastrin levels are more than 1500 picograms, then you start suspecting that the gastrinoma is likely to be metastatic. Another commonly asked question is regarding the gastrinoma triangle. Gastrinoma triangle is formed by joining 3 points. The first point is located at the junction of the cystic duct with the common bile duct. The second point is the junction of the second part of the duodenum with the third part of the duodenum. And the third point is the junction of the neck of the pancreas with the body of the pancreas. When you join these three, you get a triangle, which is the gastrinoma triangle. 90% of gastrinomas occur within this triangle. We know that gastrinomas can be very frequently located outside the pancreas. They can be located in the pancreas, usually within the head, to lie within the gastrinoma triangle. Of course, rarely they can occur in the body and tail also. very often gastrinomas can occur in the duodenal wall. Okay, the duodenal gastrinomas tend to be smaller than the pancreatic gastrinomas. 60% of gastrinomas are malignant. This is as compared to insulinomas, where majority, 90% of the insulinomas are benign. Only 10% tend to be malignant. Whereas in gastrinoma, the incidence of malignancy is much higher. These patients typically present with severe epigastric pain, similar to the pain of peptic ulcer. They get multiple peptic ulcers, which tend to be intractable at unusual locations, and they can also have diarrhea. They can often be multiple, and they can also be extrapancreatic. So I'm showing this just as a companion case. This is a hypervascular lesion located in the lumen or in the wall of the second part of the duodenum. This is producing a hypervascular lymph node around the celiac axis. So hyper-enhancing lymph node, a hyper-enhancing lesion in the duodenum. This is in the coronal phase, and in the venous phase, you can see that this shows venous washout in a patient who had presented with recurrent gastritis and loose stool. This was a duodenal gastrinoma. Remember, this is still within the gastrinoma triangle. This is also a malignant lesion. It's already produced a nodal metastases. There's an excellent article published in the American Journal of Radiology in 2012 on pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors, and you may want to read this. These tumors are also categorized as gastroenteropathic pancreatic neuroendocrine tumors. So because they can occur in the stomach, in the small bowel, as well as in the pancreas, so they are frequently called JEPNETs. Okay. Shreya, I'm going to move on to the next case, and I would request you to take this. This is a 64-year-old male patient who presented with epigastric pain, and this is the arterial phase, and I'd like you to describe this. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Sir, I've been provided with axial images of the upper abdomen in the arterial phase, and I'm able to see that there is some diffuse homogeneous thickening in the region of the antrum of the stomach. There is also some
Yes,
fluid.
very good. Yes.
There's
yes,
also
right.
some fluid in the subhepatic location and in the region of the gallbladder fossa.
Okay. Okay. And any comment on what this structure is? So this is thickening. There's also something here. And let me show you some more images for you to get a better idea. And whatever vessel is running through this soft tissue appears to be, any comment on this blood vessel? It looks irregular.
Yes,
and
sir.
serrated and attenuated. Okay. Okay. These are some more images. A little caudal. Now these are venous phase images. And this is that thickening that you were talking to us about. There is definite, and you must comment more on the thickening. This thickening,
Yes,
how would you describe the thickening?
Sir, it is
asymmetric. Yeah.
Sir, it is homogeneous. It is circumferential, asymmetric.
Mass-like. It is
Yes, sir.
asymmetric, nodular, mass-like. Yes, homogeneous. Okay. Now, do you want to make any comments? So, yes, there is definite gastric antral thickening, which is very mass-like. There is some free fluid, as you had rightly pointed out. Now, some more comment on this image here. My cursor is around something. What is that? Remember, this is the venous phase of the scan now. You have contrast in the IVC, you have contrast in the aorta.
Sir, I'm not able to see the portal vein. Is it
Very
on a
good.
different image or is it thrombosed?
Right, right. So when we looked at this, we also thought that this is we could not see the portal vein on any of the images. And this appeared to be a thrombosed portal vein. Now, how do you describe this thrombus? What is it doing to the lumen of the vein?
Sir, it is causing distension of the lumen.
Excellent.
And
Very good.
there appears to be some areas of maybe some enhancement within it. I'm not sure.
Very good. Yes, that is what we thought as well, that there is this large thrombus which is distending the portal vein, which is in the vicinity of that very mass-like thickening located in the gastric antrum. And if I take you further lower down, I would like you to notice that this is that thickening that we have been talking about. We also don't see the superior mesenteric vein. Okay,
Yes, sir.
that's the aorta. That's the superior mesenteric artery. But there is no contrast in the superior mesenteric vein. I'm also not seeing the splenic vein here, okay? And this very mass-like thickening is seen nicely. It's dramatic. And you can see some coronal reformats for your benefit. Again, notice that asymmetric, nodular, circumferential, mass-like, homogeneous thickening. So these are important words when you describe any area of thickening in the gut. Is it symmetric, asymmetric? And also you have to comment, is it causing a loss of the lamellated appearance, the mucosa, submucosa?
Yes,
So you can see here that there is no stratification. The stratification is completely lost. All these features, loss of stratification, asymmetric thickening, nodular thickening, which has a mass-like appearance, go in favor. They tell you that you're dealing with a neoplastic thickening
malignancy.
in the gastric antrum. And there are, of course, lymph nodes located here.
Yes, sir.
And there is ascites, and you can see that there is a thrombosis of the portal vein. Now, why is there thrombosis of the portal vein?
So malignancies are a hypercoagulable state, so maybe they could cause thrombosis.
No, but remember, in a hypercoagulable state, when you get a thrombosed vein, that is a bland thrombus.
Yes, sir. So this, since
This is
it's
not a
causing
bland
distension,
thrombus.
yes,
This is
sir.
a tumor thrombus because it is distending the lumen of the vein, and you also said that it may be showing some internal enhancement. So this is a neoplastic thrombus. Now, can you explain why a neoplastic thrombus should form in the portal vein in the setting of a gastric cancer? In which tumor have you seen this happening commonly?
So in HCCs and cholangiocarcinomas.
Yes, common tumor to cause malignant portal vein thrombus is HCC, hepatocellular carcinoma in a cirrhotic background. Good. But here we are seeing in a gastric cancer, which is distinctly unusual. Gastric cancer producing a portal vein thrombus is distinctly unusual, but it can happen. Now, this is new information that I'm going to give you. Gastric cancers can also secrete what is called PIVKA. PIVKA is protein induced by vitamin K absence or antagonist 2. PIVKA2 is a tumor marker for HCC. Just like AFP, alpha fetoprotein, is a tumor marker for HCC, another reliable marker which has specially been used by the Japanese people is PIVKA2. It is also called des-gamma carboxyprothrombin, and it is known that there is a rare variant of gastric cancer which has a hepatoid histological appearance also, which can produce PIVKA2, also known as des-gamma carboxyprothrombin, and the secretion of this substance creates venous tropism. This tumor extends into the gastric veins, and we know that the gastric veins drain into the portal vein. So this tumor is extending through the gastric venous drainage into either the left portal vein or the main portal vein. What is the left gastric vein also known as? Coronary vein. Yes, absolutely. So the right gastric vein as well as the left, which is also known as the coronary vein, they drain either into the main portal vein or sometimes into the left portal vein. The coronary vein drains into the left branch of the portal vein. Okay?
Okay.
So this is the route by which this tumor spreads. And it's important to know, firstly, that PIVKA2 is also a useful marker. It is even used as surveillance in some places for the development of HCC in the cirrhotic livers, right? We don't commonly use it in our country. But if you read Japanese literature, they rely a lot on PIVKA. It's thought to be a reliable marker of HCC development in a cirrhotic liver. It can also be rarely secreted by a variant of gastric cancer. And that particular form of gastric cancer is known to produce portal vein thrombosis. So if you're having your viva and you're given a case like this, then the rest of the discussion can be on portal vein thrombus. How do you distinguish malignant from benign? And then you should know all the features, right? One is luminal distension in malignant thrombus. The other, as you said, is angiogenesis within neovascularity within the thrombus, which produces that typical thread and streak kind of appearance. If you're doing an MR, then you could also show that the thrombus is restricting as much as the index lesion in the liver. You get restricted diffusion within the thrombus. As compared to this, the benign bland thrombus, which is quite a frequent occurrence incidentally in cirrhotic livers, does not produce luminal distension, does not show any enhancement, and will not show restriction on the diffusion weighted MR images. This is an excellent article published in Radiographics recently in 2019 on the spread of gastric cancer through the ligamentous and lymphatic pathways, and is certainly worth reading. Okay, I'm going to move back to Abhinava.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you. Our third resident has also joined, Dr. Soumya.
Okay. So Soumya, you've joined at the right time.
Sir.
I'm going to give this case to Soumya. Soumya, this is a 42-year-old lady who presented with melena. She had weakness and was found to have a low hemoglobin.
Sir.
Go ahead.
So this is a contrast enhanced CT, sir. In the arterial phase, there is heterogeneously well-defined heterogeneous enhancing lesion noted in the right lobe of liver. Other than that, so there is well-defined heterogeneous lesion in the left.
You have the benefit of looking at the coronal image also to try and figure out where it's arising from.
Yes, sir. So left renal in the left retroperitoneal space.
Okay, I would not be so sure it's retroperitoneal, and I'll show you more images to tell you why. So you're right, there is a lesion in the liver which has an exophytic component. The coronal image shows you multiple hypervascular lesions in the liver, and there is this lesion which we'll see more images to figure out where this lesion is arising from. But you can make out that it's also closely related to the jejunum. Right? This is a jejunal loop, right?
Yes.
And look at this.
Yes, sir.
Look at this.
A part of jejunal loop is also enhancing.
Yes.
Might be a carcinoid.
There is definite enhancement of this jejunal loop, and there is a large exophytic component from this region. I wouldn't jump to the conclusion of carcinoid. We haven't shown you the whole case. Okay.
Sir.
Okay. These are the venous phase images. Now you have the portal vein, which is opacified. So these liver lesions are appreciated, and some of them are showing washout and some peripheral kind of washout. Okay. And that lesion is also showing, with the left-sided lesion is also showing some washout. Any comment on this image?
Yes, sir. The vessels are, the lesion is in relation to the vessels.
No, this is a vein, right? This is the portal vein. This is the SM
portal vein. Yes.
So the venous drainage of this lesion is going to tell you the site of origin. Right? We also depend on the vascular supply and the venous drainage to discern the origin of a lesion. So you can see that these are veins arising from this tumor, which are draining eventually into the junction of the SMV and the portal vein, which tells you what? That the origin of this is likely to be?
Bowel, sir.
Right. Bowel. And bowel in this location would be jejunum.
Jejunum.
Okay. So we've figured out that this is not retroperitoneal, this is not renal, based on, and look at how the MIP images help you in deciding the vascular supply. Now, these are some maximum intensity projections. This is the arterial phase, venous phase, MIP images, where I'm showing you that this is the superior mesenteric artery, okay? And that's, of course, the celiac axis. It shows you hypervascular lesions in the liver. But notice that the arterial supply for this lesion comes from the branches, the jejunal branches of the superior mesenteric trunk. The venous drainage, similarly, you can see is into the splenic vein, into the finally into the portal vein. Okay, so what is your diagnosis?
Sir, it's an exophytic solid lesion from the in continuation with the jejunal thickening. And there are lesions noted in the liver also, probably METs. Sir,
so tell me your possibility.
Sir, it can be a GIST or it can be a carcinoid.
Okay, good. So good idea in the exam is
so with the clinical history of melena and
which is more likely with the clinical history?
Sir, GIST, sir.
Very good. So you have to put the clinical history in context. With the clinical history, we know that gastrointestinal stromal tumors are known to ulcerate, They frequently present with anemia because of chronic blood loss in the stool and with melena. So this is putting the hypervascular nature. We know GIST can also be hypervascular. And you're right, carcinoids are also known to be hypervascular. But remember, as far as the location is concerned, GIST is more common in the duodenum and jejunum. Carcinoids are more common in which part?
Sir, most common is appendix and then the ileum.
Very good. Carcinoids are more common in the ileum, also of course in the appendix. GIST is more common in the jejunum and duodenum. So going by the location, this is more likely to be gastrointestinal stromal tumor. Going by the clinical presentation, this is more likely to be gastrointestinal stromal tumor. And if it looks like a duck and if it speaks like a duck, it is going to be a duck, right? So this patient was a metastatic gastrointestinal stromal tumor. Okay, now let's talk a little about gastrointestinal stromal tumors. We all know that these tumors express the c-KIT mutation, which is also known as CD117, or they may express the PDGFR alpha mutation in 10%. It's important to know a little bit about the genomics of gastrointestinal stromal tumors. Those which do not express these mutations form about 10 to 15% and are now referred to as the wild type of GIST. Okay, so c-KIT and CD117 is a reliable immunohistochemistry marker for gastrointestinal stromal tumors, and the other very useful marker is DOG1. DOG1 is a marker which has 98% sensitivity for the diagnosis of a gastrointestinal stromal tumor. So pathologists look at not only the morphology, which could either be spindle cell type or epithelioid cell type, but they also try and see c-KIT positivity and DOG1 positivity. This helps them to distinguish these tumors from other lesions like leiomyomas and mural tumors like schwannomas and neurofibromas, which are c-KIT and DOG1 negative. Okay, then there is another mutation that can be seen. So I'm just telling you this, at least the important ones are worth remembering. The gastric GIST frequently shows exon 11 mutation, whereas the small bowel GIST, which the kind we are dealing with right now, more often shows the exon 9 duplication. What is the importance of knowing all this? This is what helps the oncologist to decide, is the lesion going to be sensitive to imatinib or not, right? Will the patient be more likely to have a relapse or not? So you know that all classifications of tumors and treatment of tumors is moving towards genomic analysis. So when you sit on multidisciplinary tumor boards, it's important for you to know some of the important mutations and the implications of those mutations as far as the treatment is concerned. So on imaging, the GIST tumors produce an large exoenteric mass with a large exophytic component and a much smaller mural or an endoluminal component, and there is frequent ulceration. These tumors become so large that they outgrow their vascular supply, and therefore they may have necrosis and hemorrhage. Necrotic cavity may communicate with the lumen of the bowel, and that has been referred to as the Torricelli-Bernoulli sign, which shows an internal air fluid level. These tumors frequently do not produce any obstruction. In fact, they may produce luminal dilatation, the kind we see in lymphoma. In malignant GIST, you frequently get peritoneal deposits and hyperenhancing liver metastases, but you do not get lymphadenopathy, or lymphadenopathy is at least rare in gastrointestinal stromal tumors. Distinction between benign and malignant, there is really no definitive distinction, except for, obviously, like in our case, we have distant spread of disease, so you know that you're dealing with a malignant GIST. But suspicious malignant features in a tumor include size larger than 10 centimeters, higher degree of enhancement. So the malignant tumors enhance much more than the benign tumors, presence of cavitation or hemorrhage, irregular margins, and exophytic growth, whereas benign tumors tend to be less than 5 centimeters. They show less degree of enhancement, they are more homogeneous, and they show regular margins. So although online teaching and online platforms may not be the ideal replacement for physical classes, but they are certainly better than sitting down with a book in your home and trying to learn medicine. Okay, let's move on to the next. And I think I can ask Abhinava to look at this case. This is a 6-year-old child who presented with fever and abdominal distension. Go ahead. These are the portal venous phase images. What do you
So, in the first image, I can see homogeneous diffuse wall thickening of ileum.
Yes, you're right. Location-wise, we are in the lower abdomen or the false pelvis area almost. So obviously, this lesion is most likely arising from the gut and likely to be arising from the ileum. Okay, and you have
Yes,
this
sir.
very homogeneous thickening, which is gross. This
Gross
thickening
homogeneous
must be
thickening,
measuring
yes,
at
sir.
least 7 to 8 centimeters, isn't it?
Centimeters.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah. And okay, what about the coronal and the sagittal images?
Sir, in the core image, similarly, I can see the thickening of the ileum, diffuse thickening, and with the exophytic component. So,
No, so once you, okay, we've seen thickening, there is an exophytic component, but what is the thickening doing to the lumen of the
sir, the
involved
lumen is not compromised. Yeah, the
Very good.
yeah.
What is it doing to the upstream bowel?
So
Because
there
those
is
are-
no obstruction. There is
Those
no
are things which will help you to get a differential diagnosis, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Sir, there is no proximal obstruction.
So instead of narrowing, actually, there seems to be some paradoxical dilatation of the lumen.
Dilatation. Yes, sir.
Very gross thickening of about 7 to 8 centimeters. No upstream dilatation is seen. Okay. Okay. What about these images?
Sir, in the left renal, the left kidney, I can see a hypodense, irregular hypodense lesion.
Okay. Which is not enhancing too much.
Not,
Those
yes,
are the
sir.
coronal. It's not just one lesion, actually. There are multiple lesions.
Multiple lesions in the left liver. Yes, sir.
Possibly
Left kidney, sir.
left kidney, possibly in the right also. If you see
Yes,
this
sir.
here, see this lesion here. So you have seen a large, very grossly thickened ileal loop with dilated lumen, with no upstream dilatation, with multiple focal lesions in the kidney. What is your
Yes, sir.
possibility?
So lymphoma.
Good. In children, which type of lymphoma do you commonly get in the right iliac fossa? I'm not saying this is that, but what are the common histological type of lymphoma that you get in children in the ileum?
So non-Hodgkin.
Which type of non-Hodgkin's? Of course, non-Hodgkin.
B cell.
No, Burkitt's lymphoma.
Okay.
Okay.
Sir.
So this is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma involving an ileal loop and the kidney. And this was on biopsy, Burkitt's lymphoma. Let's briefly talk about some of the histological types of lymphoma. You have the moltoma. What does MALT stand for?
Mucosa-associated lymphoid.
Mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue. Moltomas tend to be low-grade indolent lymphomas. They are thought to be due to Campylobacter jejuni infection. They can occur in the stomach. They can occur in the jejunum. What is the better term for moltoma?
So
Extranodal.
Marginal zone.
Very good. Very good. Extranodal marginal zone lymphoma. Okay. Then IPSID is a very broad category of diseases ranging from polyclonal hyperplasia to frank lymphoma. Okay. Then you have mantle cell lymphoma, which occurs in older adults and involves the terminal ileum. Burkitt's lymphoma occurs more often in children. It has been thought to have a relationship with the Epstein-Barr virus and the HIV infection. Ileum is the most common site. DLBCL, or the large B-cell lymphomas, occur in the context of HIV, immunosuppressive therapy, or as a part of PTLD. Follicular lymphoma, duodenum is the most common location. And then there is this category called EATL, which is enteropathy-associated T-cell lymphoma, which occurs in the context of celiac disease. You know that patients of celiac disease are more prone to developing lymphoma. That lymphoma occurs more often in the jejunum. It is a T-cell lymphoma, ulcerate. Then you may be asked in the exam, what are the criteria which you must fulfill for you to call a lesion primary lymphoma of the gut? And those are referred to as the Dawson criteria. And the Dawson's criteria include absence of peripheral lymphadenopathy, a normal chest radiograph, absence of mediastinal lymph nodes, normal total count and differential count, at imaging, no hepatic or splenic involvement, right? And there should be a predominant bowel lesion with nodal involvement only in the local vicinity of the bowel lesion. Then the morphological forms, you'll be asked what are the morphological forms of lymphoma. You can have the pseudoaneurysmal form. If I show you an example of pseudoaneurysmal, this is the typical appearance of the pseudoaneurysmal or aneurysmal form of lymphoma, where you have this very gross thickening of the bowel wall. And notice what is happening to the bowel lumen. It is actually dilated and not constricted. If this was adenocarcinoma, the lumen should have been constricted, okay? And this aneurysmal dilatation occurs because of destruction of the myenteric nerve plexus. And the other form is the polypoid form, which is the most common, but it's difficult to distinguish the polypoidal form from lesions like adeno-CA or like GIST, right? This is the polypoidal form of lymphoma projecting into the lumen of an ileal loop. See here, there is this large polypoidal lesion, but this would be difficult to diagnose as lymphoma. It's a polypoidal endophytic kind of lymphoma, and you would really need histology to make that diagnosis. Then you have the endoexoenteric form, which mimics the appearance of GIST. It can produce cavitation, which can communicate with the lumen, may produce an air fluid level within it. Then rarely you can have a stenotic form. Remember, stenotic forms are very rare, and you can have gross extension into the mesentery. Okay, let's move on to the next case, and this I will request Shreya to take. Shreya, this is a 45-year-old man who presented with dysphagia for the last 6 months.
Sir, I've been provided axial images of the neck and the upper part of the chest, and I can see that there is the esophageal lumen is obliterated, and there is some diffuse heterogeneous thickening along the lumen.
Okay.
And it is also causing anterior shift of the carina and the
okay, that's a carina.
And there are multiple necrotic nodes as well in the posterior mediastinum, and sir, in the AP window.
AP window, I don't. Which is the node in the AP window? You don't really have the AP window seen here very well, but you're right. There is a left paratracheal lymph node seen here. There is a large esophageal mass. Okay. What structures are these? What is this structure and what is this structure? Where my cursor is? Can you see my cursor?
Oh, sir, I can't see the cursor.
Okay, no worries. If you can't, then let's move on. Okay. We also did an MR for this patient, and these are the T1 weighted MR images. Very quickly, tell me if you have any additional information or something that strikes the eye.
So there is compromise of the tracheal lumen and
okay.
And so there are a few hyperintense areas, likely hemorrhage.
Okay, there are these hyperintense areas within the esophageal mass. Let me show you some more images. These are some coronal T1 weighted images, and you can again see those T1 bright areas within that mass. So large esophageal mucosal plus intraluminal mass with lymphadenopathy with some hyper-intense areas within the mass. What do you want to suggest as your diagnosis? So you said something about hemorrhage.
Yes, sir.
So you must have seen many carcinoma esophagus patients. How
Yes,
often
sir.
do you see hemorrhage?
Sir, it's not, usually it's not seen.
Yeah, it's not common at all.
So maybe a
Esophageal
GIST.
cancer, maybe a GIST, but the lesion looks mucosal, does not look mural. Yeah, it is
Yes, sir.
centered in the lumen. Very unlikely. And GIST is incidentally very uncommon in the esophagus.
Esophagus, yes, sir.
In the esophagus, actually, leiomyoma is more common.
Leiomyomas.
Yeah.
Leiomyomas also usually do not hemorrhage.
Yeah. It is not a leiomyoma. So what are the other T1 bright lesions or structures apart from hemorrhage? Hemorrhage
Sir,
is
it could be fat. It could be
okay. Remember,
melanin.
this is, so I'm showing you these are without fat suppression. These are with fat.
Yes, sir. So despite fat suppression, they are hyper. So it's not fat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
other than that, melanin can be
right. So we are slowly
hyper.
moving towards the right direction. This is
so maybe a melanotic met.
Right. This is a primary melanoma of the esophagus. Very rare lesion. I show it to you because this is probably the only one that I've seen in many, many years. This is a primary esophageal melanoma, and it is known that only parts of it may express the melanin, right? So only parts are showing T1 hyperintensity. The whole lesion is not T1 hyperintense. This accounts for only about 1 to 2% of all esophageal tumors. It's distinctly rare, has a poor prognosis, can spread to lymph. Who's going to take this next?
Sir.
Shreya?
Hello?
Shreya,
Yes, sir?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, so go ahead. This is going to show you a 22-year-old male with pain abdomen. It's a unusual sort of case, and I'll help you as we go along, with a lower abdominal lump and has vomiting for the last 15 days. Okay, so this is an ultrasound of the lower abdomen, and I understand that it will be difficult to interpret without anatomical localizing. So I'll tell you that this was somewhere above the bladder. We were seeing this solid-looking lesion here, which showed minimal internal vascularity. Okay, and
Yes, sir.
just cranial to the mass, we saw some sort of a weird vascular arrangement. We weren't sure what that was. This is the CT of this patient, and you want to make a comment?
So there appears to be some swirling of vessels, maybe?
Very good. Excellent. Yes,
In
there is a
third
peculiar
image.
swirling. There's a peculiar swirling. We also noticed this swirling, and of course, in addition to swirling, we were seeing this very ill-defined
soft tissue
mass.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, which was closely related with the bowel. That's the SMA. This is the urinary bladder. Is my cursor visible, incidentally?
Yes, sir. Now it's visible.
Okay. So that's the urinary bladder. That's the lesion here, closely located to bowel loops. And cranial to this, there is some sort of a peculiar swirl of blood vessels. Okay, so we were not sure what was the nature of this mass. It was obviously intraperitoneal. It was closely related to the small bowel, was not causing displacement of any of the retroperitoneal structures. And we went ahead and did an MR. MR was done 2 weeks later, and by this time the patient had started vomiting. So these are dilated bowel loops. Then this was that mass. On T1, it is hypointense. On T2, it is bright. And what is happening in the periphery of this lesion?
So it has T2 bright areas, cystic areas
Very good.
arranged in the
It has
periphery.
multiple T2 bright areas in the periphery and also some very tiny cystic areas in the center of the lesion. And post-GAD, it was not showing much. It was not showing any enhancement at all, right? These are post-GAD images. The lesion was not enhancing, right? And on T2 had shown at least a peripheral arrangement of cysts. Any thoughts on what this is?
So this is a male patient? Hello? Sir, is this a male patient?
Yes,
or,
a male patient.
Okay.
So intraperitoneal mass with some peripheral cystic areas. Okay, this was a very rare, unusual sort of a lesion, unusual appearance of a not so unusual lesion. At surgery, they found these multiple cysts at the surface of the lesion. Inside, it was more solid, and at histology, this was a lymphangioma, and that swirl was found at surgery also. This was a mesenteric lymphangioma, producing a volvulus. They have a dragging kind of an effect, and because of that, they may cause a twist and may produce volvulus. So lymphangiomas are benign lesions of vascular origin. They more often occur in the neck and the axilla. 5% occur in the mesentery or retroperitoneum, right? And in a large series from AFIP, out of 107 abdominal lymphangiomas, 58 occurred in the mesentery. The differential diagnosis of multiloculated cystic masses, which are intraperitoneal, could include duplication cysts, mesothelial cysts, pseudocysts, and loculated SITs. And we did find a case report in AJR where there was a lymphangioma which had produced a Burl sign because of volvulus. Okay. So, Soumya, would you like to take this? Soumya, can you hear me?
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. So am I?
Yeah, we can
Am I
hear
audible?
You. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you
sir.
Okay.
So
Please see this. I'll just run the video. I'll just run the video again.
Sir.
I only have axial images of this patient, and I'm not telling you the history, but what is your comment on the origin and the appearance of this lesion?
Sir.
Where do you think it's arising from?
So right suprarenal region, sir.
Very good. Yes, it is arising from.
Sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I think Raju.
So you said this is arising from the right adrenal.
Sir.
And what about the enhancement?
So it is avidly enhancing, so heterogeneously avidly enhancing lesion, so well-defined lesion.
Okay, so diagnosis?
So it can the size of the lesion is more. It can be pheochromocytoma, but the size and necrosis pheochromocytoma is not that big. So
No,
it can be adrenal cortical carcinoma.
No, size is no criteria.
Because it is symptomatic. Pheochromocytoma tends to be symptomatic in
True, but in our country, patients tend to delay before they go to the hospital. So with this hypervascular tumor, the patient had hypertension and had episodes of tachycardia, sweating, anxiety. His urinary catecholamines were raised. Okay, so this, you're right, is indeed a pheochromocytoma from the right adrenal. So what is the 10% rule for pheos?
Sir, 10% are malignant, 10% are bilateral, 10% can be extra adrenal.
Good. Okay. And where all, if you're looking for multiple pheos or extra adrenal pheos, where all do you look?
Sir, sir, it can be on.
They can occur in the mediastinum, in the retroperitoneum. And what is that specific site at the aortic bifurcation?
It's the organ of Zuckerkandl.
Organ of Zuckerkandl. And if you were to, if you're evaluating a patient for multiple pheos or extra-adrenal pheos, what investigation do you want to do?
So first we can get one urine test, the urinary venereal mandelic acid, sir. VMA will be raised. Urinary test.
But you have to anatomically localize them, no?
Okay, sir. PET scan, sir.
Which one? Which PET?
Sir, MIBG.
No, MIBG. Don't mix up things. MIBG is not a PET.
No. Sir, octreos.
So the PET, there's only one specific answer. Anyone else? Soumya, what is the, or any of you, what is the specific type of PET?
So Doudanoff.
Yeah, Doudanoff PET. Doudanoff PET. Okay, we would do the Doudanoff PET. MIBG is also a useful investigation, and I don't want to go into too many details, but Just give me a minute. I'm just answering some message on this. Okay. So on a Dodenock PET CT, even the normal adrenal shows some uptake. Therefore, small pheos become a little difficult to pick up. MIBG has a very high specificity in detecting pheochromocytomas. Their resolution is poorer. So MIBG is a scintigraphic technique. You can, of course, combine a SPECT CT along with it. So, but both Dodenock PET as well as MIBG have a role in detecting extra-adrenal pheochromocytomas, also known as paragangliomas. Okay, let's move on to seeing the next case. Soumya, what is this? This is a 42-year-old lady with pain right upper quadrant.
Sir,
Diagnosis?
so these are
These
so
are
these are magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography images. So there is a filling defect in the gallbladder neck,
yeah.
which is compressing the common CVD.
The common hepatic duct. It's compressing the common hepatic duct, producing.
Mirizi syndrome.
Very good. This is indeed Mirizi syndrome. There's a calculus in the location of the neck of the gallbladder or the cystic duct, and it's pressing the common hepatic duct, producing upstream dilatation of the biliary radicals. This is Mirizi syndrome. One specific diagnosis you can suggest. Okay, that's a schematic diagram showing you how an impacted calculus in the cystic duct produces inflammation. These patients very often have a cholecystobiliary fistula. And depending on what part of the circumference, how much of the circumference of the common hepatic duct is involved, there are classifications. They can be classified into 4 different types. This fistula, unfortunately, is very difficult to pick up on imaging. And surgeons will come back and tell you that we found a fistula, but on imaging, it is very hard to demonstrate that cholecystobiliary fistula. Okay, Shreya, this is an 8-year-old child. Incidentally detected lesion. What do you think it is?
Just a minute.
This is a MIP image from an arterial phase. Okay. And these are this is the venous image, and that's the delayed image.
Yes, so there's an arterially enhancing lesion with a central hypo-enhancing scar, which is persisting on the venous as well as the delayed images.
Okay.
So what is the age of the patient?
Age is 5.
5. So with this imaging, actually I will think of either an FNH or a maybe fibrolamellar, but the age, none of them is.
Yeah, age is wrong for fibrolamellar, and fibrolamellar will show washout.
Yes, sir.
This lesion shows no washout. And if you see that the scar looks larger on the arterial phase than it does on the delayed phase.
Yes, sir, it's enhancing on the delayed phase.
There is some delayed enhancement of the scar. And as you rightly said, it's a hypervascular lesion, okay? And that does not show washout. So I would go with your diagnosis of focal nodular hyperplasia. FNH in the liver typically occur in the background of vascular anomalies affecting the liver. They can also be seen in cancer survivors, especially in children. You get FNH-like nodules in patients who have undergone chemotherapy. So it's important to remember this fact, because when you are, following up patients who have been treated with for abdominal malignancy, and you start seeing new liver nodules, the first conclusion that we jump to is that these are metastatic deposits. But remember that patients who are treated with chemotherapy frequently tend to develop FNH-like nodules, and then it's the job of the radiologist to try and distinguish those focal lesions, whether they are FNH-like nodules or they are actually more ominous lesions like liver metastases. Okay, Abhinava, look at these 4 images together, same patient, and try and make a diagnosis, and I'll help you as you go along. I'm not giving any history. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So notice this lesion. There's a lesion here. This is the stomach. This is the cranial most part of the stomach. There's a part of the left lobe. This is the cranial most part of the fundus of the stomach. There is a small exophytic lesion here.
Yes, sir.
Similarly, there's also another small exophytic lesion here. This was arising from the gastric antrum. And in the lung, there are large nodules
Nodules.
which show very benign looking calcification. Put all this together and try and make a diagnosis. So what do these mural lesions look like from the stomach? We just showed an example of mural tumor from the jejunum. They can also be seen in the stomach. This is arising from the wall of the stomach. It's small in size. It is homogeneous. So this is likely to be. Anyone else? Soumya?
Just was pulmonary hematoma.
Yeah, go ahead. I can hear you.
Can it try?
Okay, gist. Carney's triad. Good. But you don't get hematoma in the lung. What do you get?
Chondroma.
What do you get in the lung?
So pulmonary chondromas.
You get chondroma. You get what? Yeah. You get pulmonary chondroma. So there are multiple small, benign-looking gastrointestinal stromal tumors from the stomach. There are at least 2 pulmonary chondromas, and this indeed is the Carney's triad. What is the third part of the Carney's triad? The third part is paraganglioma.
Paraganglioma.
I think Dr. Raju sir's connection was again interrupted. I'm just asking him to join again, please.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Am I audible? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I think in the interest of time, if you allow me, instead of showing this to you, I will just show this myself that we can see some more cases. Is that all right? Okay. So this was a 61-year-old male patient who presented with bilious vomiting for the last 4 months. We did an ultrasound and we saw a mass in the left side of the abdomen. This showed an atypical kind of a target appearance. You could see a central echogenic part, hypoechoic wall, which was very markedly hypoechoic and grossly thickened wall. This was arising from the jejunum. We did a CT of this patient, and you can see that the third part of the duodenum, proximal jejunum, is dilated, and that leads into a thickened loop of jejunum. I have some more images. These are coronal and sagittal reformats, and you can see the third part of duodenum nicely. That's the DJ flexure, and there is this neoplastic thickening, which is, again, if we describe it, it's very homogeneous. There is mild obstruction upstream. There were a few lymph nodes, which I don't have images to show here. No, I do have images. There are some lymph nodes, some streakiness of the omentum around it, and very homogeneous, mass-like, asymmetric thickening of a loop of jejunum. Abhinava, do you want to take a guess at what the diagnosis is?
Inflammatory
Oh, well, no. I wouldn't have thought of inflammation. Again, notice that the stratification of the bowel wall is lost. We're not seeing that differentiation into mucosa, submucosa, serosa. And this is very mass-like thickening. So you've got to think of a tumor. And there is some upstream obstruction. Mild upstream dilatation is also seen. So when we saw this, we thought this was a neoplastic lesion. We were more in favor of an adenocarcinoma, but we suggested a biopsy. And this lesion was, large enough to be biopsied percutaneously. We tried that. We tried an FNAC, did not get any result. It was non-contributory. The patient was taken up for surgery because in any case, he was an obstruction. And this was found to be a jejunal marginal zone lymphoma, extranodal marginal zone lymphoma, also known as a maltoma. They typically tend to occur in the jejunum. They have an association with infection with Campylobacter Jejanai. Okay, I think this can be the last case that we see. This is a 28-year-old man. He was going overseas and had a routine chest radiograph as a part of his visa workup. And this is the chest radiograph. Shreya, do you want to point out where the abnormality is?
Yes, sir. So I'm able to see there's a well-defined rounded idiopathy, which is seen in the it is seen to cross the from thorax to abdomen, positive thoraco-abdomen sign, and sir, it's
What are your differentials? You're right. This is a paravertebral, looks like a paravertebral opacity on both sides of the spine. Just take a...
So maybe a neurogenic...
neurogenic tumor. Usually neurogenic tumors will not extend to both sides.
Yes, sir.
They're not bilateral like this. What is the common bilateral
Aortic,
lesion?
so maybe
Common bilateral lesion in our country on both sides of the spine.
Paraspinal abscess is likely.
Paraspinal abscess, sure. On a chest radiograph, you can only give very broad list of differential diagnosis. Paraspinal abscess.
So maybe
sure.
aortic.
Doesn't really merge with the aorta. You
No.
can see the descending thoracic aorta. If this is an aneurysm, firstly, remember the patient is only 28 years old. So, okay, not much that we can add on this chest radiograph. We did a CT. What do you think? So this is obviously this is the lesion which is centered
Yes,
around
sir.
the
Esophagus.
very, very good. Yes, that is the lumen of the esophagus. It's
Which is-
centered around the esophagus, has a very smooth interface with the thoracic, descending thoracic aorta. And we had given some oral contrast, although it is little diluted, but you can see some contrast in the lumen of the esophagus, which seems to be coursing through the lesion. Okay, so what are you thinking of?
So maybe some submucosal lesion.
Like,
In
very
the,
good.
So maybe a leiomyoma or a.
Okay, that's a good thought. That we also thought this could
So
be
maybe
a
lymphangioma.
not a common site. Why should it engulf the esophagus like this? Lymphangiomas tend to be extensions of cervical lesions into the anterior mediastinum, if you remember. No cystic hygroma.
Yes, sir.
This would be very atypical for a hemangioma. Lymphangioma. Lymphangioma should be more cystic. This lesion, we weren't really sure. It didn't really look cystic, although we did offer a differential diagnosis of a duplication cyst also, because remember, duplication cysts can sometimes have hyperdense contents. So on CT, we suggested two differentials. Since this was very closely related to the esophagus, to like a mural lesion of the esophagus, we said this could be a leiomyoma, and we also gave a differential of a duplication cyst. We did an MR of this patient to make this differential between these two entities. What do you think after the MR? So that's the T1 weighted post-contrast image, that's T2, and that's a diffusion weighted image, B800.
So it's showing diffusion restriction. So,
Good. So between the two, between duplication cyst and leiomyoma, what would you favor now?
So maybe a leiomyoma.
Good. Duplication cyst should not show restriction.
Yes,
It should
sir.
be much brighter on T2, right? T2 was not, it was showing more of an iso-intense kind of a signal, diffusion restriction. So we told our surgeons, this is likely to be a mural tumor. More common tumor in the esophagus is leiomyoma. Although GIST could have the same appearance, but simply based on statistics, esophageal leiomyomas are more likely. And we suggested this was a leiomyoma. Okay, these are post-GAD images. Not much enhancement was seen. That's a T2 coronal, again, an iso-intense, not bright like a cystic lesion at least. That's the histology of this patient. Overall features were those of a leiomyoma. It was negative for DOG1. DOG1, remember, is a marker for?
GIST.
What does DOG stand for? Any idea? DOG stands for discovered on GIST. As obvious as that. Okay, I think with that, I should end this session. It's the fag end of the day. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you, the three of you. Hats off to the women power that all three volunteers were girls. I don't know what's happened to the boys. They clearly have lost their guts. very, very impressed that all 3 volunteers should be
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
session. Thank you.